Roy Lee Ward execution. The time has finally come for him to give an account. Death row inmate Roy Lee Ward was executed by lethal injection early Friday morning at Indiana State Prison in Michigan City. This is the second execution in the state in 2025, and the third since the death penalty was reinstated after more than a decade of suspension. Roy Lee Ward was convicted of the cruel and heinous crime of murdering and raping teenager Stacy Payne in 2001. Journalists were not allowed in while the state carried out Ward's execution. The Indiana Department of Corrections carried out this sentence, reinforcing the state's commitment to protecting communities from violent predators. This execution itself is an act meant to serve as a strong warning. Those who commit such heinous crimes will face the full weight of justice. Please like and subscribe if you're new to the channel. The final hour. Indiana Department of Correction officials said in a statement that the execution process started shortly after 12 a.m. Central Time, and Ward 53 was pronounced dead at 12:33 a.m. CT. He was convicted and sentenced to death for the 2001 rape and murder of 15-year-old Stacy Payne in Spencer County. It remains unclear, however, when exactly the execution drug was administered, the amount of pentobarbital used, or who witnessed the execution. Early this morning, the execution of Roy Lee Ward was carried out, delivering accountability for the brutal rape and murder of 15-year-old Stacy Payne on April 16, 2001, said Indiana Attorney General Todd Rokita in an early Friday statement. Following his 2007 conviction and death sentence, Ward's case was thoroughly reviewed, culminating in the Indiana Supreme Court setting his execution date and Governor Mike Brown rejecting his request for clemency. Ward's defense team declined to provide specifics about the inmate's witness list, but said no media were present in the witness room. Roy Lee Ward was executed by lethal injection at Indiana State Prison. The execution took place shortly after midnight on Thursday. This culmination occurred almost 25 years after the murder of Stacy Payne. Ward had been on death row since his conviction in 2001. The drug used for the execution was pentobarbital. He was pronounced dead at 12:33 p.m. Central Time. DOC officials said Ward's last meal was from Texas Corral and consisted of 1 hamburger, 1 steak melt, 1 order of French fries, 1 baked potato with butter, 1 order of 12 fried shrimp, 1 sweet potato, 1 order of chicken Alfredo, and 1 order of breadsticks. His last words were, "Brian is going to read them." Ward's legal team told him he was referring to his spiritual advisor, Deacon Brian Nosbush, who was supposed to read a prepared statement from the inmate just before the execution took place. It's unclear whether Nosbush, who was present in the execution chamber, was allowed to read the statement aloud, however. Stacy Payne was full of life and had a bright future. I took that away from her and her family. I wish I could go back and change things, but I can't. I hate myself for what I did. If I could take away every pain I've caused Stacy and her family, I would. There's no excuse. I hurt my family too. I wish I could take that away. I've asked God for forgiveness, even though I feel I don't deserve it and can't forgive myself. I hope my execution brings Stacy's family some peace, the statement read. While incarcerated, I've been on a journey to be a better person, and I hope I haven't failed, Ward's statement continued. I've embraced God and believe the words he wrote are words to live by. I hope God continues with me on this next journey. I want to thank people again for being respectful of my mom and dad when they were alive and not holding what I did against them. I love my family and friends and want to thank them for helping me and staying with me. The inmate's attorneys withdrew the last 2 federal lawsuits seeking to delay his execution after reaching an agreement with the doc that ensures compliance with the state prison's written execution protocol. The cases were officially dismissed by the U.S. District Court for the Northern District of Indiana on Thursday. For years, Roy has told his attorney that if his execution helps Stacy's family feel better, that's what he wants, Laura Volk, one of Ward's attorneys, told reporters. A heinous crime. First responders and relatives recounted the details of Payne's final moments in emotional testimony before the Indiana Parole Board last month. Deputy Attorney General Tyler Banks called Ward a murderer, a rapist, a predator, and a manipulator, emphasizing that two separate juries had reached the same conclusion, that his crime warranted death. Witnesses told the board Ward entered the teenager's home before her shift at Jenks Pizza. Ward proceeded to rape Payne and attack her with a dumbbell and knife. She was left with 18 blunt force injuries, her throat and abdomen cut open. Dale Town Marshal Matt Keller, the first officer on the scene, said he found Ward standing in the doorway with a knife in his hand and tried to reassure the wounded girl that help was coming. Paramedic Jane Stout testified she had never seen anything this brutal, recalling that Payne was conscious but unable to speak because of her injuries, tears in her eyes as she struggled to breathe. Payne's mother, Julie Weininger, told the parole board her family had endured 8,839 days of emotional devastation, and that granting clemency would tell the world that Stacy's life didn't matter. Her daughter, a high schooler on summer break, was an honor student, cheerleader, member of student council, and active in her school's band. Ward's attorneys countered that he had long struggled with mental illness and was recently diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. They argued that his disability had affected how jurors perceived his remorse, noting that he once wrote he avoided saying sorry only because it would sound fake and not be believed. Voices of opposition. Outside the prison Thursday night, a small group of anti-death penalty advocates gathered to read scriptures and pray. Among them were members of the Indiana Abolition Coalition and the Diocese of Gary. Death Penalty Action, a nonprofit that advocates against executions, loaned to protesters the Delaware bell, which the group has rung outside more than a dozen other executions. The small, quiet protests have become a ritual at the Indiana State Prison, where clergy and activists have gathered before each of the past 3 executions to call for an end to capital punishment. Roy Ward can be held accountable and severely punished without executing him, said Abraham Bonowitz, executive director of Death Penalty Action. Indiana's execution process. Indiana resumed executions in 2024 after a nearly 15-year pause, following years of difficulty obtaining lethal injection drugs after pharmaceutical companies, under growing scrutiny, refused to sell their products for use in executions. But state officials have refused to reveal where the state obtains its pentobarbital, citing a 2017 secrecy statute that shields the identity of suppliers. Lethal injection is the only method permitted by state law. Indiana's current single-drug protocol calls for an intravenous dose of pentobarbital, a fast-acting barbiturate. It's unlikely that any additional executions will be carried out at the state prison this year. 5 men remain on Indiana's death row, but only 4 have been deemed competent to be executed. In order for a capital punishment to be carried out, the state must request and be granted an execution date from the state Supreme Court, a process that can take weeks or months.